life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, last week we were talking about how you got into this whole business, why you do what you do, where you came from, why you feel like you've got something to share, and what authority do you have to share it. And I think we had a very interesting discussion. You were talking about what propelled you to get into sales in the first place and how you learned a lot about yourself and your ability to make a difference in the world and some of the things that contributed to that decision. And I know that our viewers would like to hear more of your story. Maybe we could go on with that a little bit longer.
Well, it'd be all right if we did, I guess. We were talking about the ladder of success, that there really wasn't one, that there were plateaus, that in a progress in my history from 1200 to number one, I recognized by the time I got to 900 it was the same thing as being at 100.
And we're talking about your position as a sales manager.
Sales manager with, at that time it was Alcoa. They had several divisions. At the time it was Cutco and wherever, and Westmoreland, and their aluminum siding and this type of thing. And but it was fascinating, and in 57 I had the breakthrough where I shot to number one and was justified going full-time. And I knew that I wanted to do what I'm doing today, but there was a lot to learn. And it was apparent after 2 years that there was no greater laboratory than creative direct selling.
What's a laboratory,
Bern? Instead of laboratory, it's laboratory in the sense that most people really haven't been challenged. And when you draw them into a creative direct selling environment, now what I mean by creative direct selling is you go out into the world and you knock on a door and you walk in and say an hour to an hour and a half later, they didn't even know your product existed, and yet you walk out with somewhere between $3.55 and $7,000. You know what I mean? That's salesmanship, creative direct selling. Now, it's fraught with fruitlessness and failure. And I found that if someone had any shortcomings or weaknesses within them, okay, that it would come up like cream on milk, okay, and that you could work with it in that environment. It's kind of like, and I don't mean to make the comparison, but you know, the reason they experiment with gerbils and rats is that the process is so quick. Okay, now they can detect what's going to happen with a drug when they do it because their lifespan is accelerated. Well, in this case, life is accelerated to the point where if a person is lacking in some characteristic, you can find it right away and begin to nurture it and guide and coach and what have you, and occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally have some magnificent flowering of human beings. I've seen it.
Now, do you think that happens in other environments besides selling as well? Maybe anytime people are uncomfortable because they're learning and growing, some of their weaknesses
I think there's a sophomoric reality in colleges. For example, a lot of people will change their majors in college in their sophomore year. They realize, whoa, if I keep doing this, I'm going to have to do this the rest of my life. And they cull themselves out and change from medicine to education, or education to philosophy, or they'll change their majors. I think that happens. But no, I don't think it's the same. If a person goes out and gets a job, they step into a state of accommodation. They're told what time to come to work and what to do and how to do it, and they get rewarded with a paycheck.
The work flows to them.
Sure. And it's not the same challenge. I've seen very capable, apparently competent people who were, right-sized, downsized, capsized out of their jobs and wring their hands and wrench their hearts for months and months, hoping to find a job. And when they didn't, take a crack at selling and immediately, just spin right out and couldn't even handle it. They weren't prepared to be free. I have a presumptuous phrase that I often use in some of the seminars, that this is not the land of the free and home of the brave. I have found that out over the years.
And why do you say that?
Well, it's a land for the free and a home for the brave.
And if you're not free and brave...
Yeah, because
then
most
what?
people aren't free, and when they get a chance to be, they're not brave. In other words, they don't endure.
We don't choose freedom.
That's right.
We choose the safe, secure environment
Exactly.
of bondage, which is a regular job.
It's kind of like I haven't punched a clock, haven't stood a review, haven't kowtowed to any single person since 1957. You know, I mean, I've gone where I wanted to, when I wanted to, did it the way I wanted to do it, and I'd want that for everybody. I mean, actually, what I've been up to for years is pulling people out of the job market. Pulling them out, giving them a chance, coaching and training, and setting them free. And a lot of them have done very, very well. I've got numbers of young millionaires, a lot of 100,000-aires in my background, who attribute that process, okay, to the volatility and to the coaching that they got under our direction. So, pretty satisfying life. Those are the assets of a life, when you think about it. 19 young millionaires altogether. It's pretty exciting.
That's wonderful.
And I don't take the credit for it, because I'd have to take the credit for the people who didn't do it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the information and the tools were provided so that that individual who was open and ready, okay, to practice and to integrate information, boy, could really accelerate quickly. And
So
that's what we've been doing.
do you think there's some truth to the statement that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear?
No.
And if the student isn't ready, no matter how much teaching
well,
you give them, it kind of goes over the top of their head?
I think that's a kind of a Zen type term.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. And I think that as teachers move through life, they will find students and prepare them. You know what I mean? There's a different perspective that I have about that. I think some people are ready and don't realize it. You know what I mean? But they're coachable. I remember one young fellow, he was 16 years old, Jody Talal. We might have mentioned him on the show before. But I mean, he had quit school and run away from home, and just a little rebel, and we recruited him and adopted him and coached him, and he was responsive. I mean, he actually would say, "Tell me what to do and I'll do it." And we said, "Well, we will, but know that we'll do it so that you can be conscience free." That's important, okay? And he just matured and matured. When he was 17, he had his minority removed, co-signed for his father to buy a car. I mean, it's awesome, you know what I mean? And as a young 18-year-old was making dream income today's dream incomes back in had to have been 69 and 70. But yeah, he was a good student. And today, he's been a multi-millionaire. And very proud of him. And a magnificent management, if you would, over his time and his life and his money, and, yeah, great student, and that's just one of many. And there's a lot of 100,000-aires out there, but it's finding people who are ready to grow. And when you bring someone into an environment like this, it's not forever. Usually.
Now, why do you say that?
Well, because they're going to glean everything there is to learn. In other words, if a person commits themselves to an environment and really goes in and absorbs and accumulates and assimilates the information that's there, and practices those skills, that very soon, within, I'd say, a year, 2 or 3, depending upon the environment, they're going to glean everything they're going to get. And now they need to spin off and do something else. See, every communal environment should be committed to preparing its members to spin out and do whatever they want to do with their lives. But that's contrary, see, isn't it? Most people hire or recruit people to try to hold on to them forever. They don't want the turnover. You know what I mean? And the turnover is healthy. In other words, if, for example, I could have a Jody Talal and a Troy Frazier and a Bukharaj and people like this that I could spin off into their life, then it's easier to find others who might want to do the same, okay? And then there are others who should be excused from the environment because they weren't assimilating, they weren't absorbing, they weren't even trying. They were hanging out, they were here. So you've got to find people who really say, yes, this is for me, I really want it all if I can do it all. And most people aren't prepared for that. They've been de-prepared. See, one of the things we devote ourselves to is re-preparing people, re-preparing them, because it's not preparing them, but re-preparing. There's a big difference. See, one thing I realized in '57, that in those 2 years, and in the 40 years subsequent, what I've been hearing out here is kind of a mainstream of information from our coaches and mentors of information or motivational material that's supposed to get the big job done. Okay, in other words, you've heard some of it. If you're going to be successful, you've got to have self-confidence. And let's say practice makes perfect, and forgive and forget, and don't take no for an answer, and keep your your nose to the wheel and your ear to the ground, and I don't know. Pretty hard to work that way.
Your shoulder to the wheel, your nose to the grindstone, your ear to the ground.
Yeah, all these things are really delightful. See it big, keep it simple, stay positive. This kind of chatter, you've heard it, I know most people have. And yet, when you look at it, the results have been 80% of the results out of 20% of the people, and that's in the conventional business market. In conventional. Like IBM, they pay us salary and expenses, and Pitney Bowes and people like that. Now you get into the more volatile selling arenas, where there's really a challenge, like insurance or real estate, copy machines, vacuum cleaners, cookware. The real selling jobs, you get in the 90-10. There's 90% of the income and results are coming out of only 10% of the people. Not a very good track record. Not too terribly long ago, a year or so, I met a young fellow named Todd here in Sacramento who his first year in his insurance office, out of, I believe, 17 agents, had 60% of the business of the office. See,
his first year.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a ladder he was climbing.
Exactly. Now, somehow, what was it that was different for him, see, and that's what I've been looking at. And then in multi-level marketing, which is spawning more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. They're doing an incredible job. I have a lot of phone buddies and pen pals who make 10 and 20, 30,000, 50, 100,000, 250, 300,000. One fellow, last time I met him, about 3 years ago, his name was Mark. I was making $770,000. Now, these are all monthly figures.
Yes.
Monthly figures. And yet, in multi-level marketing, it's about 95-5, and that's being generous. That 95% of the money is being enjoyed by 5% of the people. Now, that's not wrong. It shouldn't indict business or the real estate and insurance or the multi-level. See, because if these people can do it, these people could do it. It's that
What's the difference?
we indict our lack of preparation.
It's lack of preparation.
Oh, sure. Or the de-preparation that occurs in our families, schools, churches, and the marketplace. It's kind of like,
So so how much credit do you give to personality that we're just born with and our ability? Like some people have the ability to be great dancers, and other people that could never be a great dancer, no matter how hard they try, they just don't have the physical ability. What about mental ability or personality ability, if you know what I mean?
I think there's no question that occasionally there's a gifted person here who, without any coaching, without any training, actually has retained his capacities. I believe that every person is born to sell. We've talked about this before. Every person is a born salesperson, but we've been de-prepared by well-meaning and loving parents that said, don't talk to strangers. Stop teasing. I've told you no, I'm not going to tell you no again. This kind of stuff. Or who do you think you are? You'll never amount to anything. Why do you think you're going to be a doctor? Why do you know what I mean? There's always this lack of confirmation.
So it's just beaten out of us.
Sure. I think, no question, it's not a thinking. I know that's true. I heard school teachers say some abominable things to kids, and counselors who coach kids to stop dreaming. You know what I mean? And, it goes on and on and on. And so the idea is to assist people in re-preparing themselves. And we have specific essays that we can talk about next week or so just about that one thing. This is not a good track record. Now, another thing that I kind of get excited about is that we're at least 6,000 years old, minimum 6,000 years old as a cognitive community, and not very good at it. Too many divorces, too many wars, too much hurt and pain and bereavement, too much prejudice, too much bigotry, there's too much of all the negatives in our lives. After 6,000 years, you'd think we'd be better at it than this. Wouldn't you? Really.
Are we getting better or are we getting worse?
Oh, we're getting better.
Do you think so?
Oh, yeah. And as we get better, our mediocre looks worse, that's all. Pardon?
The divorce rate is rising, and there seems like there's more war and on a larger scale than there's ever been before, and there's still such incredible poverty.
Yeah, but it's not as bad as it was. You take, for example, our worst today, would be, our mediocre today would be horrible in days past. In other words, men did things to each other 100 years ago that I mean, we don't even consider anymore. It's not even a possibility. Oh yeah, we're getting stronger and stronger as a society. Better parenting is going on in a lot of cases. It's just that when things get better, everything gets relative, doesn't it? Mediocre looks worse. Yeah. And fact is that crime is dropping. And I think people are beginning to learn how to get into relationships, or what we call relationships, and be able to thrive more. Now, it's statistical, but it's getting better because the information is gradually getting out there. I know, like I said a moment ago, there's parenting going on in my life way beyond anything I was able to do. Didn't even have any idea, some of the techniques that my own children are employing. We've kind of discussed that. Another thing, too, the people who set out to go into business for themselves, they want to get out of the job market, so they're going to go into business. 90% of them go to work for idiots. And that's not my saying that, by the way. A fellow named Darden said that. But 90% of the businesses will fail in 5 years, another 90% will fail in another 5. That doesn't indict going into business, indicts our lack of preparation to do so, okay? And a lot of these people who are doing this are recognizing there are sources of inspiration and stimulation available to them in the bookstore and in the hotel and motel lobbies and what have you in the form of seminars. See, a lot of people aren't aware. Like, for example, we live in a market area, we'll say 1 million people here. It's more, but we'll round it out to 1 million people. And Gina, I would estimate that probably out of 1 million, 850,000 of them have never been to a seminar.
Yeah, at least.
At least, yeah. Never been to one. In other words, and they have no concept of what that is. But what's been happening in the last couple of decades is that individuals, certainly I'm not the only one, there are a lot of them out here who have examined their life and their techniques, have capsulized it, and in a couple hours you can collect ideas that you can take out and immediately make work for you. And then come back. See, like there's probably, I would say, at least 300 seminars a month in Sacramento, one form or another. 300 seminars a month. And who's going to them?
Same people.
Same people are going to them, yeah. Every month. See, they found that there's a way of moving forward quickly. And a lot of people are outside the loop. And that's one of the reasons for Life Talk, the fact that here's the thing, that without reservation we can put our information out over the airways, and it strikes the minds and hearts of a certain number of people who might get the idea. And a lot of people have come to a sample seminar and go, wow, I want to see more of this. And we've had some major breakthroughs. And it's been a lot of fun. This is not satisfactory. And what I did in 1957, I stepped out here, outside this mainstream, into an obtuse position, not to deny or refute any of this, okay, but to applaud it and compliment it, spelled with an I, but also to try to complement it spelled with an E. And that was to bring it closer to a completion. Now, as I'm contending that most of what we've heard out here in the success world might cover this much material. I mean, co-contributors like Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar and Wayne Dyer and Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy have covered this kind of stuff. Dale Carnegie. Can you think of any other names?
Oh, there's hundreds.
Isn't there?
Anthony Robbins.
Anthony Robbins, sure. They've covered this magnificently well. And what I've done is to devote my life to see maybe if there's this there. See, in other words, this is where I focused on, to complement what's already been said, rather than just parrot it. Because, frankly, if I was just going to parrot it, then I would go and promote these people, because they're good. I enjoy them. I mean, it'd be a lot easier, and I think I'd probably make more money if I was promoting Jim Rohn. You know what I mean? Yeah, I wouldn't have any qualms about doing that, because they're delightful. But they're not saying all the things that we have realized over the years because of this obtuse positioning. One of the things that I've recognized that what we get here oftentimes is vocabulary and grammar. Vocabulary and grammar.
What do you mean, Bern?
Okay. In other words, there are so many words in the English language that can be put together grammatically that make sense, that we could hear the same message over and over and over again. And a lot of people reach that point where they say, I've heard all this stuff before. I've heard it all the time. I've heard, and they have. They've heard it in different format. A good illustration of that is the bear in the phone booth. You remember my talking about this in the past?
It's been a while.
Yeah. There was a semanticist who commissioned an artist to draw a picture of a bear in a phone booth. Now, this is going to be pretty rough here. I'm not pretending to be an artist, okay? He's making a phone call. And there was a car sitting out here with a fellow sitting in it with a certain look on his face. And there were some mountains in the background and some shrubs by the booth. And they asked 25 writers and speakers, articulate people, to write captions as to what was happening in that picture. Okay? Every sentence was different. Every sentence used different words. For example, one might write, the bear was taking his time completing a call to a friend while the man impatiently waited in the car. Another person would say that the man was aggravated having to wait for the bear to complete his conversation. Someone else would, in other words, everyone would say essentially the same thing
in a different
way.
Language.
And they took these words that had been employed, okay, all the words that had been employed here, the vocabulary, if you would, and put them in a computer and permuted the number of grammatically correct sentences that could be written just with these words. Am I making myself clear?
Yes.
And the answer to that was 19.6 billion. Billion.
Oh, billion.
With a B, yeah. 19.6 billion sentences. Just mind-boggling. In other words, we could say a sentence a second for 1,200 years in order to say what was happening in that picture. Of course we're hearing the same thing over and over again. Now, what I have focused on, therefore, is semantics. In other words, if people listen to our shows carefully, or when they come to the seminar, they listen for the differences, it's going to appear in the semantics of it. And that's where the focus has been. It's kind of taking a real careful and jaundiced look at what we say, how we say it, and rephrase it semantically. Trying to think. Rick Walker was a guest one time on our show here several months ago, and he was talking to me one day, and this was a semantical issue. He noticed this flight attendant who just looked like Silverstone, Alicia, is it Silverstone? One who played Batgirl? Anyway, he thought to himself, boy, does she look like Silverstone? Okay? And he said, well, I can't tell her that. So what he said was, have you ever seen Silverstone, Alicia Silverstone? She says, yeah. She looks just like you. See, there's a semantical difference there. Okay, in other words, rather than telling her that she looked like an actress, she said the actress looked like her, and it was much more complimentary. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you or not. People say, you look just like so-and-so. You'd feel a whole lot better if they said, so-and-so looks just like you. I don't care what the circumstance is. There's a semantical twist in there. And there's hundreds of others that we'll kind of get into as we go along. For example, forgive and forget is a semantical faux pas. See, it's a lie. You know what I mean? This doesn't work that way. There's no erasure in the human mind. And so you're not going to forget. Therefore, you might get stuck with a lack of forgiveness. And so in Command Commission, we address that. In other words, what is that semantical difference and how can we treat it so that there really can be a cleansing of the heart and the mind through forgiveness without actually forgetting, because you're not going to do that anyway. And so, and then there's the idea of parents being responsible for their children. That's a semantical faux pas. See, because you can't be responsible for someone when they have their own mind and their own agenda. Okay, and if you're responsible for them, what do you got to do? You got to control them, you got to mold them, and you got to direct them. Okay, and what's that child going to be doing all the time you're molding and directing? They're going to be pulling and resisting, weaning themselves away if they possibly can. And so the semantical difference would be to be responsible to the child. To the child. Now you can nurture and guide. And now you can prepare them to leave the nest. And then they don't want to quite as much. You know what I mean? In other words, it's not that it's reverse psychology, but if you're trying to embrace someone and hold on to them, boy, they're quick to get away. And these semantical things come into our prospecting, into our presentations, and into our life and our living. This is what this show has been about, life, living, and making a living from a different perspective that makes it all easier and better and certainly more productive. That's what this whole thing is about. I was Credentials-wise, its results, years of examining and testing and writing. We've done over 20,000 interviews, store to store, door to door, on the street with people, groping for answers, trying to see what the denominators are, how people perceive things. For example, when we start talking about love, we get caught in a lot of semantical deals.
What kind of questions have you asked in your seminars? What information are you looking for?
Oh, in those socioeconomic reviews?
Yes.
One thing we've had over the years a lot of fun with is where is your confidence level, self-confidence level? We hear talk about self-confidence. Where's your self-confidence level, we just say to someone. And they look at us and they think for a while, and you can see that slide going up and down. They're not exactly sure. And oftentimes they'll say, well, depending on what? Or they will say, well, I guess somewhere between 40 and 90. You know what I mean?
Well, that's kind of a broad
spectrum. Yeah, broad spectrum,
Yeah.
say, depending on what's going on. And so we recognize out of that self-confidence is another semantical faux pas. Now, confidence you want, but when you put self on there, you create a whole different problem. And that's the subject of a whole evening's performance here on television. Just the word self gets us into more darn trouble. Yeah, because it misdirects us, it misguides us in many, many ways. I'm trying to think if there was anything that we can short circuit. We do know this, that we want to get past the ladder of success. The other day I was watching Stephen Covey work, and he had this thing about, you climb the ladder of success realizing too late what?
You're against the wrong
It was
wall.
the wrong wall. Yeah, isn't that terrible? And the other day I saw a ladder of success drawn this way. Went up and then it went back down again. And the guy was tangled up in it somewhere here. It's kind of cute. We got to get through this kind of stuff. And next week, perhaps we can talk about Kurt Ueops. In fact, I'm going to give you a little preview peek here. Kurt Ueops. You want to watch that show. This is fascinating. Our life is loaded with these things. What is that? They're conventional wisdoms that aren't. Aren't what? Conventional wisdom. They're not wise at all. So we'll get to that. Gina, this has been Life Talk. And we did too much of it. My name is Byrne.
Moses.
And you're Gina Fitt. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Byrne.